Good morning again, or rather good afternoon. I have no slides, and I have been asked to be provocative, and I have 6 points to share with you. I start with the question, in what way or how can we achieve that resource efficiency is going to be a successful policy and not a repackaging of what we earlier called sustainable growth or sustainable development or factor 4 or factor 10. And I'm looking at the problem from a more macro perspective, where some of the other panelists have addressed the micro or sub-regional perspectives. So my first point, to answer the question I just posed positively, is to get the prices right. Prices for the resources, I mean. Which means that for carbon, for instance, we have a trade system, but there are all kinds of issues to still be resolved about air. Because it can't be that it's apparently very efficient to send truckloads of Dutch pigs to northern Italy, slaughter them, cook them, transport them back and call it Parma ham and sell it in the Netherlands. Then there was something wrong with the price of air and other resources in between Amsterdam and Parma. Number 2, governments, national and European, should be reliable partners for both the population, the people like you and me, and the businesses. So that, for instance, when in the policy of a low-carbon economy, a government opens a subsidy for solar energy, which opens on a certain day, is fully subscribed the next day, and it's going to be closed again. So those people who think they get subsidy for solar energy and are just reacting 24 hours later than their neighbors don't get it anymore. This is a real-life example. So if you're not a reliable partner as a government, you're not going to achieve your resource efficiency. One of the results already 10 years ago, when I was still in the Netherlands and led a project on climate change called COOL, it was climate options for the long term, but we thought the name COOL would be nice for a climate project. The consistent complaint of the big Dutch companies in this case was that the achievements that they were asked to do, namely a 50 or an 80% greenhouse gas emission reduction in about 50 years, was doable if governments gave them enough time and didn't change the policy every 3 or 4 years. Number 3, set clear targets and stick to them. So also for resource efficiency, it's not just try to be as low as possible, but also say in 5 years we want to do this, this and that, like the 20-20-20 policy or the Kyoto targets. You've already seen setting targets and sticking to it is difficult. There was a nice graph showing that. Number 4, create incentives for technological and other innovations. So, for instance, again as an example, set challenging targets and give industry and countries a clear time horizon to arrive at it. Euro standards for car emissions are clear examples. They're based on some research, they're announced, companies get time to adapt to it, and at a certain point of time they're there. Number 5, again refer to an earlier presentation, use global sustainability criteria and do not pass the burden to less developed countries. The example has already been given. There's more examples, like Korea buying lots of land in Madagascar for their own food, big oil companies buying millions of hectares of land in Indonesia and Malaysia for biofuels. So footprints, Millennium Development Goals should play an important role also in Europe when we are going after resource efficiency. Number 6, keep the resource efficiency indicators simple. My My background is originally economics, but I've worked 25 years in environmental science, most recently in Wageningen in environmental systems analysis. And my experience is that as an economist, we were rather simple. There was an indicator selected called gross domestic product, and a few others on employment and on industrial development. And these were the measuring rods. But I think in environmental science, we've been struggling for decades to come to something which we could all use and all agree on. And that's why I think, if I think back to the 60s and 70s, with the Brundtland report, with dissertations of a compatriot called Rufi Hüting in the Netherlands, who had all kinds of good proposals for resource accounts, and we're now implementing them, but it's 30, 40 years ago. So my cry for my heart is basically, let's get on with it. Use these 6 points, which I'll repeat in a minute, so that we can really, in 5 years' time, look back and say, this has been different and is better implemented than earlier policies on sustainability or factor 4 or factor 10 or so. My link to the INSPIRE community, or the spatial data mappers, is related to the last point on Pedro's slide, namely to make a link between the mostly, let's say, physical and biophysical data that you collect on a spatial scale with the mostly socioeconomic data that are not always very well to be found at spatial detail. In order to really check the policy, first implement the policy and check the policy, we need better linkages between the two. The natural science ones, the biophysical ones, the chemical ones, and the socioeconomic data. So wrapping it up, I see 6 points for a successful resource efficiency policy. Get the prices right, be a reliable partner, set clear targets and stick to them, create incentives for innovation, use global sustainability criteria, and keep the indicators as simple as possible. Thank you very much.